Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you joining us. We're about to embark on a truly wild journey, basically shrinking ourselves down to explore the microscopic factories that quite literally build human existence. We're talking about the cell. But listen, we aren't going to just stare at some static textbook diagrams today. We're going to really dig into how completely lifeless chemicals somehow come together to create a living, breathing, incredibly dynamic masterpiece. So let's just dive right in. I want you to imagine the cell speaking directly to you for a second. I am the unit of biological activity, organized into subcellular organelles assigned to each our specific duties. Thus, I truly represent life. I just love that quote. It hits the nail on the head perfectly, doesn't it? A cell isn't just some random microscopic bag of goo. It is life itself, highly organized and incredibly purposeful. So here is our game plan for today. First, we'll cover the building blocks of life. Second, prokaryotes versus eukaryotes. Third, we'll go inside the cellular factory. And finally, disease and programmed death. All right, kicking things off with section 1, the building blocks of life. Have you ever wondered about your actual chemical recipe? Like, what are you literally made of? If we take a standard 65-kilogram human, the stats are fascinating. Water makes up over 61% of our weight. I mean, water really is the ultimate solvent of life. Then we've got proteins sitting at 17%, mostly hanging out in our muscles, and lipids or fats at 13.8%, mostly in adipose tissue. Minerals make up about 6.1%, and carbohydrates? Interestingly enough, they make up just 1.5% of us, serving mostly as a quick, short-term energy reserve. Now, water obviously gives us most of our mass, but there is one element that acts as the absolute star of the show here, and that's carbon. Living matter is mostly made up of 6 key elements: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur. But carbon, it is the undisputed heavyweight champion of versatility. Because it can form these incredibly stable covalent bonds and virtually infinite chains of carbon attached to carbon, it's insanely adaptable. Get this, it's estimated that about 90% of the compounds found in living systems contain carbon. It's the ultimate molecular building block. Of course, we don't just magically jump from a single carbon atom to a full human being, right? There is a very specific structural hierarchy. Our basic organic compounds, things like amino acids and nucleotides, assemble into complex macromolecules, like proteins and DNA. Then those macromolecules come together to build structural components called organelles. The organelles make up our cells. Cells group together to form tissues and organs, and finally, all those organs collaborate to run the whole organism. It's just a breathtakingly logical progression of scale. Moving right along to section 2, prokaryotes versus eukaryotes. This is the grand biological divide. When you stack these two up side by side, the difference is kind of staggering. On one side, we have prokaryotes, like bacteria. They are tiny. We're talking usually just 1 to 10 micrometers. Plus, they have no defined nucleus and completely lack complex organelles. On the other side, we have eukaryotes. These are much larger, typically between 10 and 100 micrometers. They possess a very distinct membrane-bound nucleus, and they are absolutely packed with complex organelles. The crucial takeaway here is that humans, with our mind-blowing 10 to the 14th power of cells, are entirely composed of these highly organized eukaryotic cells. Which brings us nicely to section 3, inside the cellular factory, where we'll explore those specialized departments. Think of the eukaryotic cell like a massive, hyper-efficient manufacturing plant. And you know, every big factory needs a control center, a CEO. In the cell, that's the nucleus. It is the largest cellular organelle, completely surrounded by a protective double membrane envelope. But its true power lies in what it's actually protecting in there: our genetic blueprints. The nucleus safely houses our 46 chromosomes, securely packing away the DNA that dictates literally every single function of the organism. But having a system this highly organized begs a pretty terrifying question. What happens when the CEO's office gets compromised? What happens when the very structure protecting our fundamental blueprints begins to warp or fail? Well, we see the answer to that in a truly heartbreaking condition called Hutchinson-Gilford progeria syndrome, or HGPS. This is a very rare aging condition that kicks in right at birth. It happens because an abnormal protein called lamina A accumulates and literally distorts the nuclear envelope. Because the structural integrity of the nucleus is compromised, the body ages incredibly rapidly. It brilliantly, though tragically, illustrates just how vital the physical structure of our cellular organelles is to a normal human lifespan. Stepping out of the executive suite, we head down to the energy department of our factory. The powerhouses, the mitochondria. Depending on the specific cell we're looking at, there can be up to 2,000 of these rod-like structures, taking up a full fifth of the total cell volume. And here is where it gets absolutely wild. Mitochondria don't just produce ATP, the main energy currency that powers all of our cellular work. They actually have their own independent circular DNA and their own completely separate protein synthesizing machinery. Because their structure is so remarkably similar to prokaryotic cells, scientists actually hypothesize that they evolved from ancient aerobic bacteria. Billions of years ago, these bacteria likely formed a symbiotic relationship with ancient cells. So we literally have the descendants of ancient bacteria running the power grid in our bodies today. All right, so we've got power. Now our factory needs its assembly lines and shipping departments. That massive job is handled by the endoplasmic reticulum, the ER, and the Golgi apparatus. These organelles are basically a complex, interconnected network of membrane-enclosed spaces that extend all throughout the cytoplasm. And they divide the labor perfectly. The rough ER is studded with these little structures called ribosomes, which act as tiny factories churning out proteins. Then you have the smooth ER, which doesn't have ribosomes, so it focuses heavily on synthesizing lipids or fats. Once those raw products are made, they are handed straight over to the Golgi apparatus. Think of the Golgi as your central packaging and shipping center. It modifies those newly synthesized proteins, maybe tagging them with carbohydrates or lipids, and then packages them into vesicles to be shipped across the plasma membrane, or even secreted completely out of the cell. It's just a flawless microscopic relay race. And that takes us to our final stop. Section 4, Disease and Programmed Death. Look, every factory produces waste, right? So the cell needs a top-notch recycling center, and that's the lysosomes. These are spherical vesicles packed with these really powerful digestive enzymes called hydrolases. Their entire job is to aggressively digest and recycle cellular waste, old proteins, lipids, carbohydrates, breaking them all down so the cell can actually reutilize the base components. They are out there constantly keeping the interior of the cell clean and dynamic. But what if the factory's internal shipping system messes up? That brings us to something called eye cell disease. It's a very rare condition caused by a defect in protein targeting. Basically, the crucial digestive enzymes are synthesized perfectly fine, but they get completely lost in transit and fail to actually reach the lysosomes. And without those enzymes, the lysosomes just can't break down cellular waste. This leads to catastrophic ripple effects throughout the entire organism. It just proves how important precise internal logistics really are. Working right alongside the recycling center, the cell also runs a dedicated hazardous materials team, known as the peroxisomes. These single membrane organelles contain a specific enzyme called catalase. Their primary job is incredibly crucial. They protect the cell from the toxic effects of hydrogen peroxide by swiftly and safely converting it into completely harmless water and oxygen. To ground this back in human reality, consider Zellweger syndrome. This is the most severe form of a group of conditions called peroxisome biogenesis disorders. In Zellweger syndrome, functional peroxisomes are completely absent from the cell. Without this tiny little detox unit, very long-chain fatty acids start to accumulate to toxic levels. Tragically, the condition is fatal, often within the very first year of life. It just goes to show, you can't skip even the tiniest detail in this cellular factory. Every single microscopic part is essential. So, we've looked at what happens when things break down, get damaged, or get lost in transit. But that leads us to a pretty fascinating, almost philosophical question to wrap up our explainer today. What happens when a cell does everything right? What happens when it has perfectly fulfilled its ultimate biological purpose? The answer is apoptosis. Apoptosis is programmed cell death. Cellular suicide. And it is so incredibly vital to understand that this is vastly different from a cell dying because of an injury, radiation, or a lack of oxygen. No, this is a highly regulated, beautifully orderly shutdown of the factory. It is a completely natural, built-in process designed specifically to protect the surrounding tissues and ensure the overall well-being of the entire organism. And that leaves us with this final, profound thought. To truly live, our cells must know exactly when to die. The blueprint of life isn't just about endless, infinite growth. It's about delicate balance, precise coordination, and the understanding that even at the microscopic level, there's a time to build, a time to sustain, and a time to gracefully let go. which really makes you wonder, if our cells know exactly when to trigger their own end just to save the whole, what other incredible secrets are hiding inside your very own biological factory? Keep learning, stay curious, and I'll catch you guys next time.